Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
I named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in paints.
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my man who has a pretentious superhero name. It's Frank. How are you today?
Invincible. Damn it. He's a Viltrumite. Invincible. That's all I got.
I like the... It's a Viltrumite.
He's a Viltrumite.
Invincible. Frank, we're here to talk about Invincible, but before we do that, what are you drinking?
I am not. I'm not.
Frank.
I'm sorry. Okay, look, I don't know how much I've talked about in the show, but I just bought a new house. We just moved in.
We know you've mentioned it every week for a year.
No,
it hasn't been
Bought
a
new
year. It's
house.
been like 3 weeks.
Just moved in a few days ago, a few days ago, and I have not had a chance to go buy beer. And the process of moving means that I drank all my beer because of how stressed I was.
That makes sense.
So I am out of beer. And so I got nothing. I got some wine around here, and I got a little bit of liquor in the cabinet, but I don't have a beer.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I have not bought a new house, am not moving, and I am also out of beer.
Okay.
So my excuses are very little, except that I just finished one off, and I just haven't made it to the liquor store yet. So we're doing a dry Beer with Geeks to match our humor. Am I right? But yeah. Now the bell.
The bell's really
the bell.
The bell's the only thing carrying us. We don't have beer.
That's right.
Yes, my beer comes from the Nothing region. It is air, and doesn't really have much flavor. Honestly, I'm pretty unsatisfied with it. I should have gotten something else.
If your air has flavor, you should be incredibly worried.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They say that carbon monoxide has no odor and no flavor, so this must be fine, right?
Yes.
Maybe? I don't know. You know what's better than just fine is the writing of Mr. Robert Kirkman.
Yes, indeed. Frank, let's talk about Invincible. You and I both read the comic, right?
Yes.
The Image comic that came out such and such a number of years ago from Robert Kirkman.
Many years ago at this point.
Ryan Otley was the second artist. I can't remember who the first artist was. Corey Walker. Yes, I did that from memory.
Good job.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I did that. So anyway, Invincible is would you call Invincible a satire?
Ooh, I don't know if I'd call it a satire. It's not really satirical in the sense that it's not poking fun at a genre or like.
No, okay, I would call it deconstructionist.
Deconstruction,
though.
I would agree with, yes.
Yeah, I would call it not necessarily in the way that Watchmen is complete deconstruction of superheroes, but it certainly is. But Invincible certainly is playing with genre stereotypes. Yes. Like whether that be the superhero archetype or the hero's journey or maybe appropriate genre appropriateness or expectations or anything like that. So I think it's playing. I think it plays with all of those things really well, and the comic does a great job. I loved the book. I was really sad when it ended. Actually, it ended on its terms, right? It was like that was the end of the story,
right? Which is what I think Kirkman is really one of the. I think he's an underrated writer of his generation. And
Get going. He has two of the biggest. He has two of like the biggest, like independent series of all time, and we're like,
Who?
Right. Who?
Right. His work is
Who?
not
Todd McFarlane?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
His work is not necessarily underrated. Like everyone knows The Walking Dead. It's something that even if you're not in, it is a household name. The Walking Dead is,
but he's not a household
Right.
name.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I think he is underrated. And I think Invincible is just fantastic. Invincible to me strikes a lot of and especially when it was first starting out, the early couple of volumes of the trades, which is how I read it, really strikes me as it's very much in the same vein as the first in the early years of Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man. Right? It's a very similar tone and style of storytelling, and appealed to me for many of the same reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the comic really evolves into a different thing than it starts in. Yeah, and we could talk about that another time, but we're really here to talk about Amazon Prime's first season, 10 episodes, renewed for seasons 2 and 3 already. And so I wonder if that means that they already knew it was coming and they ordered 30 episodes, because that's pretty standard with animation. A good way to get animation out the door pretty quickly is that you order a big chunk of episodes and then you split those episodes into different seasons, so that way you're not waiting years for the next one, which is why sometimes shows get canceled. Even it feels like they just showed up, but they got canceled after 2 or 3 seasons as opposed to 1, because they already pumped out a bunch of episodes. And so I assume that I assume that it's been good. I felt like it was a slow trickle that people kind of built up into. I didn't know a lot of people who watched it, and some who thought it was pretty slow at first. But I think that they're maybe not they're not in it for the long game. They're like, I'm not surprised I'm not surprised in the first 10 minutes, so it must be boring.
I think that's true. I think that there's definitely a lot of that. I did kind of feel like it was a little slow to get moving, though, and I was in the tank for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that has to do with animation, and I think that we are trained from a young age to expect faster moving stories through animation, because we tend not to look at animation as an adult medium, but we look at it as a kid's medium, and we expect that kind of tempo and rhythm that you would get from a Disney film or a Don Bluth movie or something like that. Although Don Bluth movies move real slow if you go back and watch them.
But look at a DreamWorks animation film and how those are colorful musical acts, fart jokes. Just like boom, 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 boom. Like there's some kind
a lot of fart jokes in the Prince of Egypt.
Every few seconds.
Yeah. No, but you're right. Actually, there is a fart joke in the Prince of Egypt. Damn. Damn. Yeah. Shoot. I thought I had you. But you're right. You're right. They're designed and and built for kids, like Illumination Studios. With the Minions and the whatever. They're just not in it for a lot, for the kid audience. And Invincible is definitely not in it for the. They're not in it for the adult audience, and Invincible's not in it for the kid audience. This is hardcore adult television, and it doesn't start that way. And the first episode is really spoilers for Invincible from here on out, but it lulls you into a false sense of security. Because there's action, there's this, but it doesn't get gory until the end of the episode, and that's really that's what separates Invincible from the other superhero flock, right? You can break as many bones or stab as many people as you want in DC or Marvel comics, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to come back to life and be fine.
And this show is very violent, but also very bloody and gory at times, and
eyeballs flying.
Yes.
Everywhere. Flames on the side of my face.
Brains splattered everywhere. Like there's a lot of violence in a lot of
flames, brains, and automobiles. Yeah.
Wow.
Who needs beer when you've got dry jokes?
These dry jokes are making me thirsty for beer. Yeah.
These dry jokes are making me thirsty.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were going to say something?
I was just going to say, yeah, it starts, I mean, it's not like it's not kid friendly from the beginning. Like there is swearing, there is some violence, but even if you were to say like, all right, it's fine for like, whatever, my kids heard swearing, it's fine. It gets real bloody pretty quickly. So it's really not for children. But I
actually watched the first episode with my wife, who's not into violence or blood or anything like that. And so I was watching because I wanted to watch it. I was watching, which is so rare. I was like, I'm going to put this on the TV. You're not in the room, and I'm just going to watch this thing. And she like came and sat down. She's like, oh, what's this? So I'm like, oh, it's Invincible. It's like, he's the dad is like a Superman type, alien comes from other planet, blah, blah, blah. His son's getting his powers. It's his coming of age story, so on and so forth. And she was like, oh, okay. So she was kind of watching it. And then Nolan, Omni-Man, just kills the Guardians of the Globe, completely annihilates them. And I watched the shadow on her face kind of fall and drop. And by the end, she was like, that was awful. Why would you make that? Why would anybody watch that? Why is that a thing? Like, I'm in a terrible mood now.
Oh.
Like, I know. And I was like, oh, sorry. So I had to like watch Invincible in secret because I knew it was only going to get worse.
I mean, truthfully, yes. Yeah. It does. It comes right out of the gate though with that at the end of the first episode, which overall, I think this was pretty faithful to the comics. Like in broad strokes, it was quite faithful. But I do feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that incident with Nolan and the Guardians, that didn't happen as early in the comic as it did in the show.
It did not. It did not. It happened. You had a couple. Well, I think the first episode is a couple of issues. It's not all the same issue, I think. But when you got 10 episodes, you got to learn what to keep and what to cut, I think. But if you didn't include it in the first episode, you would have just shown up and been like, here's just standard superhero fare. It's a coming of age. He's got powers. He's got the suit maker, but his dad's a hero, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, okay, that was fine. That was good. Yeah. That wasn't anything to write home about. But the twist is what maybe keeps people in
exactly,
for the
next.
next.
You're exactly right. I think that it was good. It was good story structure to move that to the beginning of the end of the first episode, because that hooks people in. I think about our conversation about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I keep almost calling the Captain of the Winter Soldier, but that's at the end of the show. But the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I felt like the first episode kind of ended, and there was, I guess I'm so conditioned now to have there be some kind of a twist or whatever, but I didn't really feel that at the end of the first episode of that show. But here,
no, there wasn't. Yeah,
and that's why I think I said on the podcast, maybe they should have given us the first couple together so we'd have a twist at the end or whatever. But
you said Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yes,
I was like, because
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, because this one
they
had the
gave
first
you the twist
three
at the end of the first episode, which I think is a good way to draw people in, especially with a streaming show when it's basically at the end. If they've made it to the end of the episode, this is when they're going to decide: do I keep going or do I stop?
Mm-hmm.
And like, do I hit the next episode? Like, let it autoplay to the next episode, or do I back out and go watch reruns of Friends? And and by putting a twist at the end of it, people are like, all right, I'm in for one more. I'm in at least one more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the strength of the show comes from a few things. One, I like the story. The story's fine. I think it could move at a faster clip. I think it's probably the biggest detractor for me. I'm like, they're about 40 to 50 minute episodes a piece.
Yep. And
there's 8 episodes in the first season. And so you're watching almost 8 hours of animation.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of animation. Your eye can actually really only take so much after so much time.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think it's true.
And so
it all starts sort of blending together at a certain point, right?
Right. Well, live action, even if it's just people talking, right? And that's what we pay to see most movies do. It's just adults talking to one another about stuff, and you're like, oh, what entertainment? Like look at them.
I really
talking.
like the way that guy talked to the other lady.
Yeah, they said it in a good way. Yeah, money well spent. $20.
I really believe that
anyway.
She felt the things that she said.
That's right. Otherwise I wouldn't have believed them. All right. Well done, everyone. So, but I think like there's the way your eye catches humans is very different than the way that your eye perceives animation.
100%.
there's more to look at. Even if it doesn't look like there's more to look at, your eye is noticing more things about it perceives more things in humans than it does in animation. And so when people are just talking to each other in animation and they're not really doing anything, you get bored.
That's 100% true. And there is plenty of science to back that up. I work in marketing and advertising, and one of the things in digital advertising, and one of the fundamental truths about digital advertising is that if there's a picture of a person in your ad, it's going to catch more eyeballs than if there's a nice graphic or some kind of design, something abstract or whatever. It might be beautiful, but the human brain is wired to look for other human faces, and it will, the eyes will be drawn to that subconsciously. So yeah, even if you have the same scene where it's just dialogue in an animated show versus in a live action show, I think people are going to be more engaged and pick up and listen more to the live action version because they're trained to look for a human face. Whereas an animated one is fundamentally biologically not as much of a draw. But the animated format lends itself so beautifully to this story.
It does, it does. It is its strength too, and I want to talk about that. I do want to talk about that. The eye thing and the human form made me think of that new Geico commercial where the little guy is like, and it's really about eye contact, and he just stares at you. And I'm like, this is hilarious because I'm staring at nothing. Really, I'm not really making eye contact with anything, and so it's not unsettling the way that it would be if it was something with a pupil, I guess. But yeah, the animation I think is actually its strength. The way they format the cells and the backgrounds with the flying is the thing that and the cityscapes. That's the thing that really sold me on this. There's a lot of really cool perspective work in how they're utilizing the space, and it was just really, really cool, really well done.
They did a really nice job with that. I agree. The flying. The flying sequences were really nicely done. There's some really beautiful landscape, cityscapes and sunsets and things like that are like the sun setting over the city that are really, really cool and beautiful, pieces of art, honestly, moving art. I really like that. The voice talent is top notch.
Excellent. Yeah. Stephen Yeun, excellent. Mark Grayson.
And he's having a hell of a year, by the way, right?
He is having a hell of a year. Yeah. Between that and Minari, he's going strong. People are recognizing him, and I like it. Yeah. Sandra Oh as his mom. Debbie. I always clutch with Sandra Oh. You can't go wrong with Sandra Oh. J.K. Simmons, the MVP of anything that he's in. Truly. He has a lot of J.K. Simmons has a lot of animation work under him already, so he already really knows how to work the microphone and where to inflect and when not to, and because that's true animation is not just acting with the microphone in front of you. You have to say things in a way that your face can't be seen.
Yes.
And that's where some people get it and some people don't.
That's right.
But he was a great choice for Nolan. I don't think you probably can't get much better than him.
Yeah.
Maybe Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Maybe, what's his name? Mad Men.
John Hamm.
John Hamm. These are the types, but J.K. Simmons has the voice in a way that no one else does.
It's funny because you mentioned Jeffrey Dean Morgan and John Hamm, who maybe look more age appropriate for the part if they were to play the part in live action. And maybe that's why our minds are drawn to people like them. But honestly, I was a little bit skeptical when I heard it was J.K. Simmons because I was like, well, he doesn't look the part, but it's animation, so it doesn't matter.
That's correct.
And I agree. I think having watched the whole series now, I can hardly imagine someone doing a better job than him.
Well, I think the smart thing that the showrunners did is they rounded out the cast with a lot of actual, I shouldn't say actual voice actors, but real voice acting talent. Clancy Brown, Greg Griffin, these, Kevin Michael Richardson.
Yes.
These are the people that make their living off of animation, and so they go hard
true.
And work off one another.
And you know what else they did though that I thought was interesting? Because they did that. They people who are working voice actors and who are make their living from voice acting. They had lots of folks from that world, but then they had a lot of on-camera character actors. like Jason Mantzoukas and Reginald Val Johnson.
Yep.
Like what?
Yeah.
Like that's such a not obscure, but such a an interesting, unique is the word, a unique pick for animation, where you would use Reginald Val Johnson because he's a known face and he's everyone recognizes him from TV and Die Hard and whatever else. But you wouldn't necessarily think to put him in an animated film. And maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe he does a ton of animation and I'm just off, and someone will tell me if I'm wrong. But to me, that was such an interesting pick. And Jason Mantzoukas, I recognized his voice immediately. Zachary Quinto, recognized his voice immediately. What an interesting group of people they put together. Walton Goggins as Cecil.
Walter Goggins was great. Didn't sound like him.
Didn't sound
it was
like
incredible.
Him. Totally had me fooled.
Yeah, although do you know? Well, Reginald Val Johnson was oh no, you know what I was thinking for a split second I thought he was a voice actor for another show, but I'm thinking of somebody else because Reginald Val Johnson was Family Matters, right, in Die Hard. Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Mahershala Ali.
I mean, there's some other Marshawn Desmond Hinzu, Ezra Miller, Jonathan Groff. These are
Jonathan Groff. I missed that.
Yeah, he was Rick Sheridan. He was in one episode.
Okay.
Yeah, so John Hamm was actually in 2 episodes. He played Steve.
Oh, okay.
You know, Steve? Yeah, but you're right. There's a Jillian Jacobs.
Yes. Oh,
like
she was great as Adam Eve.
Yeah, that was a strong pick.
Really strong
I thought
pick,
that I think all of them were really strong. Where I'm like, everybody fills the part the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And I like that it lets you live in the world. It's not stopping to explain why the CIA is linked with the Guardians of the Globe or who Cecil is and how did he get here and blah blah blah. It's very in media res. Here's the world, but you're gonna follow Mark.
Yeah.
And
you get it. You pick up on what's going on. Like, okay, Cecil is the head of this organization, and that's all you really need to know. Right? Is it doesn't really need to know the ins and outs and the history of it and whatever. Like, it's just you get it, and you go.
That's right.
Forward from there.
Yeah, and a lot of times you really don't even need to know everybody's name. And I think that's when it comes to superheroes, like we take for granted that we know a lot of people that show up. Like if you watched Infinity War, you can be like, oh, well, that's Falcon, that's Captain America, and that's Iron Man, and that's Star-Lord, and that's Gamora, and that's Nebula, and that's this, and this, and this, and this, and this. But when you're not familiar with the world, you're like, that's the lady that is the shade of a blueberry.
Right.
And that's the lady who is the shade of a lime.
I mean, there's even the episode where Adam Eve is like, no, I'm not Monster Girl. I'm Adam Eve. I'm the pink one. She literally says, I'm the pink one. I think that's actually something that sometimes I think I felt this way when I read Invincible, the comic, is that I felt a little I've mentioned this before. I feel a little overwhelmed by all the characters. And I'm sort of like, am I supposed to be invested in all of them? Because there's 10 of them and I all met them at once. And they all kind of seem like just analogs for the Justice League.
Yeah, they're just a stereotype.
Right.
Yeah,
but this show does that a little bit differently, where there's a big group of supers who you could, if you really cared, you could stop and try to learn all of them and their powers and their names and everything. But it doesn't really matter. It's sort of like, oh yeah, there's the quirky one and the robot and this one and the one who can transform and the one who does this and okay, cool, got it.
Yeah, and as the show goes, because as the comic goes, some of them fall by the wayside. Some of them, some of them you care about, you end up caring about more. But the show you follow Mark, but it's really an ensemble piece because everybody's Eve's got her own story going, Mark's got his story, Robot's got his story, and you might see the Mahler twins and do you care about them? Do you not? But it lets you choose who you want. I've got a former student who I'm friendly with. His favorite character was Cecil. At the end, he was like, Cecil's the coolest, and that's your prerogative. That's great.
I can see that.
Yeah, Cecil is great. Cecil is excellent. But at the end of the day, for any of these things, I always say, any kind of ensemble piece, whatever, you still have to care about the main character. And I think Steven Yeun does a great job, and the show does a great job at making you care about Mark and Mark's choices, and what does it mean to have responsibility and powers, and how would you react in this situation, in this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So even though you do care about, Eve might be your favorite character, but you still care about Mark. Hermione might be your favorite character in Harry Potter, but you still have to care about Harry a little bit.
Of course.
Otherwise, why keep going?
Of course. Yeah. Exactly. So I love all of that, and I think that's a great comparison. Is like you might have a favorite supporting character, but like the story is the main character's story, and so like if you're, it's almost like if you're bought into the supporting character, it's through the lens of what that supporting character means to the primary character in a lot of ways, not entirely, but in a lot of ways. I also think that the whole like the teenage dynamic of Invincible in general, and the way it's portrayed in this show is the thing that when I first read it, was compelling to me in the same way, like I said, that All-Star Spider-Man, that Ultimate Spider-Man, drew me in when I first read that. But now watching this, revisiting this story, this property as an adult, it is, I have a completely different, like that stuff is fun and they handle it well. But I found that like the Nolan and Debbie dynamic, the parents, and then Nolan and Cecil, and like the adult dynamics were much more interesting to me now than they were when I read this basically as a kid.
Yeah, it is pretty. I do find it's interesting, like where my interest goes now. Where I'm used, like, so when I was a kid, like how hard can Superman punch something?
Yeah.
Right, and how like what cool thing can he do and fly away and spin around and this and blah blah blah. And then I think like if I saw Superman Returns as I feel now, he doesn't throw one punch in that movie, and I go, that's okay. I don't need him to do that. I don't really need him to do anything. And that's so different than how I used to see things. And that's like, I'm way, like to your point, I'm way more interested in what the adults in the room are doing.
And I feel like that's sort of the I feel like comic book fans as a population, to overgeneralize here, have matured in because we've gotten the,
as far as comic book readers go, we've definitely
and to a certain degree as comic book movie fans have gone, but like we've gotten what we always wanted. Like, I just want to see these two hash it out and have a fight. And like, we've seen plenty of that now. We've seen tons of that. We've seen many a city destroyed by a superhero fight. And now I think many of us are finding that nuanced approach more interesting, to where like you'll have episodes of these Marvel shows that are and Invincible, where it's like it's more about the conversation and the interpersonal dynamics. We always talk about like some of the best superhero stories are the ones where they're just having a conversation. They just happen to be in costume.
Correct. It's funny. It's funny you say like the Marvel shows, like, some of them, they're just standing around having a conversation. You're like, that's good television. That's good superheroing, because knowing the nuanced approaches, the punch isn't always necessary, and that's important. But sometimes it is necessary, and when you earn the fight, it makes the fight more watchable. Totally. It's not just fighting for fighting's sake. It's almost like the beginning of it's like the first episode of Invincible versus the last episode, and like what fight is actually worth having. And at one point, and what I really like about Invincible on the whole is that it deals with consequences, whereas like a big criticism of the MCU is that there really isn't a lot of consequence to what happens, like these universe-ending events, and you're like, everything's pretty much going back to the way that it was. There's some differences, and we're dealing with some things, and things are a little bit different, but it's fine. People come back, people, whatever, but if a building comes down, that's a big problem.
Right.
And here's why. If, Cleveland gets wiped out, that's a problem. And here's why. And I like that nothing ever gets brushed under the rug. Like the time for that. And they even kind of talk about this in the shows, like that the time, like they're trying so hard to brush stuff under the rug, and it's just not working because the time for that has passed. And I really like that concept. And not to say that I always want that in superheroes, because like my mainstream superheroes, my Supermans, my Batmans, my Captain Americas, my Spider-Mans, Iron Man, whatever, I like that it reverts to the status quo because that means I'm going to get more stories with them.
The perpetual second act.
Yeah. Exactly. Like I never really want those to end. Just please keep going. Like The Simpsons. Bart's been in the 4th grade for 30 years. It's fine. Like just keep going. Whatever. Stories like Invincible allow you to deal with consequence, and that's what makes them. That's why Watchmen is interesting because it used to be self-contained, but even in the stuff that you see moving forward with some of the new Watchmen stuff, it still deals with consequence. What is the you're fleshing out the world, but you're still dealing with the same problems, and that's what I think the greatest strength of Invincible is. But the animation is beautiful, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Correct. Yeah, I'll say that finale, the season finale episode was probably my favorite of the season. It really built up really nicely, and it's the most violent as well. But like you said, that violence was earned. Those fight scenes were earned because it is the culmination of 8 episodes of build up to these moments where you're seeing the consequences of everything that's happened up until now. And they did a really good job holding back on like Nolan's big reveal, holding that until the end, and using that as like a mystery for those who haven't read it, a mystery to like, why did he do what he did at the end of the first episode? And it sort of carries you through until you get to the finale when he reveals, what's really happening.
I do feel a bit that I wish that I didn't remember the book so well, or that I didn't read it, because I'm watching it. I'm not that I'm bored, but I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, it's a little bit different than like taking characters that I know and telling a new story or a new twist on a story that I know. This is literally the story that I know, and that's great, and I'm enjoying it. But like, I know why he did the things that he did, and I know where it's going from there, and blah 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 blah. So, that's my own personal regret.
I share that because I remember just enough to where like all the major plot points, all the spoilery major plot points I remembered, and it was more the details that I didn't remember all of. So I was sort of watching to remind myself of the little details in between the big plot points.
It's such a double-edged sword, though, because we're like, show me something new but similar. Like, what?
I know.
Show me the thing that I love. Here's the thing that you love. I don't love it.
I know. Our friends Justin and Trent and Hunter had a really good conversation on their new Star Wars podcast, Protocol 13, where they were talking about adaptations and like how close to the source material should it be, and like if it's too close, then it's almost like, well, then what's the point of watching it? I'm just watching the same story again. But if it's not close enough, then it's like it's not what I remembered, and so it's not that familiarity. It's a really interesting double-edged sword. You're right.
Yeah, I think about the Lion King remake like as like a thing. Like, it's pretty much exactly the movie from the 90s. It just takes a lot longer to get there. My wife and I just watched the first 25 minutes of it, just out of curiosity. Like, how's the animation? Blah blah blah. Like, 25 minutes is it's just at the end of I Just Can't Wait to Be King, going into Elephant Graveyard. And I did, okay, so what's 25 minutes into the 90s movie? And it's right after the Dad, we'll always be together, right? And so I'm like, ooh, tough call. Tough scene to walk in on. But like, I'm like, wow. So I have a very good amount of time when you're telling the exact same story, but you're telling it at 0.75 speed to what I'm used to. That's not great. That's not a great thing to do. That's too much adherence. But I think what Invincible's doing is almost the opposite, where it's like, I'm going to give you the big plot points and we're going to move it, and we're going to move it and groove it, because who knows how many seasons we're going to get out of this.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm glad that they have been greenlit for seasons 2 and 3. I'm excited for more of it. I will say I was, early mid season, I was a little like, all right, let's pick up the pace here, guys. Like, this is kind of, I don't know if it's going to keep my attention. I don't know if this is going to earn an hour-long slot in my week every week. And frankly, I let a few weeks go by, and I had to binge to catch up at the end. But I'm glad I did, because I think it was worth it in the end. And I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys this kind of story, whether you've read it or not. I would say definitely give it a shot and give it a couple episodes. I think episode 1 will really draw you in. And if you feel like it slows down after that, stick around till episode 4 at least before you decide to jump off the train.
Yeah, it's a good way to go. A couple of shout outs that we didn't talk about previously. Mark Hamill, always great to see him.
Right.
Yep. Speaking, Zazie Beetz as Amber, I think also did a great job for a non-powered, one of the only non-powered characters on the show. Really holds her own.
She carries a lot of the show too.
She does indeed. My question for you, who was your in these 8 episodes, not in the comic, but 8 episodes, like who besides Mark, who are you drawn to the most?
Eve. I like Eve a lot.
Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Eve a lot, and particularly Sandra Oh's portrayal of Debbie in this version. I really, I don't think I really paid much attention to Debbie when I first read it because I don't know, I was young and didn't think very much about the parents in the scenario, but I really like Debbie.
Yep. No, I think that's good. Mine is Clancy Brown's Damien Darkblood,
Nice.
the kind of the Hellboy, kind of the Hellboy avatar. I just thought that was great casting, and I just thought it was fun.
It was really good.
And so that's me. More Damien Darkblood won't happen, but whatever.
That's okay. I'm with you.
That's what Hellboy's for. Yeah. See, that's like an act for. That's what Hellboy's for. So anyway, Frank, it is a pleasure to see you as always. Tell us where people can find us.
You can find us over at beerwithgeeks.com. You can find us at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. Thank you to everyone for listening to Save Me, the Smallville anthology. I'm very, very proud of the work we've done over there. It's a podcast documentary about the making of Smallville. Many of you have listened already, and I really, really appreciate all of you who've listened, left your Apple Podcast ratings. I'm very, very proud of the work that a few of us have done there, and looking forward to cranking out new episodes for the next 5 months at smallvilleanthology.com. But you can find that show and Beer with Geeks anywhere podcasts are found, whether it's TuneIn or Spotify or Stitcher or Apple Podcasts, all the various podcast networks and directories. You will find all of our shows there. You'll find us at patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio if you'd like to throw us a couple of bucks to help us keep making new shows, because we love doing it and we appreciate all of you. I'll be back at Superman and Lois TV Talk starting this week as you're listening to this, because that show is spinning back up. So check that out on the network as well. And you can email us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com or at beerwithgeeks on Twitter if that's your jam.
Nicely said. It is my jam. Nicely said. But Frank, let's go have our own individual jams for dinner. And so until next time, cheers.